Well, thank you. Anyhow, it is our birthday, and it's fun to see everybody here, especially Olivia Viggio in the back. Will be, let's see, class ICTD 2030, perhaps? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the program, but mostly what I really want to focus on is where information communication technology for development has come from, the different phases that this program has grown along with the field of ICTD, and talk a little bit about what I think, there's a woman just featured in the video. I just played our video. All right. And talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities that we're going to have as an academic field and a practitioner's field moving forward. And I was going to hand out the hats, but Aaliyah already beat me to that. So that is great. My mic? Hello? No? Should I yell? Okay. All right. I'm very shy. So, all right, I'll try to speak up. But in any case, I just wanted to show proof that we have graduates. This is our first graduate class in the front, our third cohort that graduated. And how about people that are in the fifth cohort? Raise your hands right now so we can kind of know who you are. Excellent. Thank you for coming and representing. And I just want to show that we have some fun. We go to conferences. We attempted to have a bike team. We made it all of twice. And sometimes we even do goofy stuff. Because development itself is a pretty serious and heavy topic. And a lot of times in some of my classes, my students leave a little more depressed than when they came in that day. Because they're like, my gosh, there's so much wrong with the world. How am I as a technologist going to fix this? And so sometimes we just have to go blow off steam. And then we get back to fixing the world. So in any case, I just wanted to point to a few of the students that we've graduated and the kind of work that they do on their semester-long practicum, which is, I think, the hallmark of our program. It's really where students get to go and instead of writing a boring thesis that no one's going to read, they actually go and work with a nonprofit organization, a development agency, a foundation, a policy organization on trying to work and deploy their skills in the field. And I think that they just end up learning a ton, which is even more exciting. And Heather, I had to put your picture in here, even though Heather was a PhD student and not a master's student. I'm so proud of the work that she did in maternal labor monitoring tools in Kenya because it really did save lives and continues to. And it's just impressive and humbling. And it's the reason I like to teach, because as one person, yeah, I can do my little bit. But when I'm educating 20 or 30 or 40, this is such a bigger amplification. And that kind of impact, I think, is really where change happens. So it's been an interesting looking back at 5 years of this program. When I first started this program with John Bennett, there was a lot of kind of back channel talk on how is this even going to work? How is this going to, survive? Other people in my field just thought, how do you do a cross-disciplinary program? It's hard to do that. Are you sure the engineers are going to be able to hack the social science and the social scientists are going to be able to learn the technologies? And I'm thinking, my God, if you can learn Portuguese, you can probably learn Python. And these are the questions we wrestled with. And it really is because Atlas exists that we were able to do this program, because this program gave us the umbrella and the support to go put together a really incredibly strong multidisciplinary program. And these are the places where our students have either worked on coursework, lab projects, practicums, or PhD research in the field. And I look at that, and that's pretty amazing. Okay, we haven't hit Australia. And we haven't hit Russia, but then Russia threw out all of its NGOs a few years ago, so I guess we don't have an excuse on that. So, and if I look at this and reflect, it makes me think, wow, we've come a long way as a program, and ICTD has come a long way as a field. And I would say that we have, kind of 3 distinct phases I'd put this in. ICTD 1.0, which is sort of when I entered the field, which was this idea that tech could do everything and anything. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But there was this exuberance that if we just bring connectivity to people, development will happen. Voila. It didn't happen, which is why we've had to struggle through ICTD 2.0, and apparently we have ICTD next, because there is still some poverty left in the world. In ICTD 2.0, we're mostly looking at trying to work with development sectors as opposed to being kind of renegades in development. Work with health professionals, work with educators, work with school systems, work with ministries of the environment, et cetera. And then I think we're right at the cusp right now where ICTD 2.0 is ending and ICTD next is starting off. So we'll talk a little bit about that, because this is very exciting. And this is where we sort of leapfrog everything we're doing, even with information communication technology in a U.S. context. And it's even more exciting abroad. And we're bringing back products and services that are starting in places around the world back to the U.S. to use, which is a huge shift. So I'm excited by it, at least. So let's talk about ICTD 1.0 a little bit. Let's just say let's put this in about the 2000 to 2009 time frame. So just picture yourselves there. Okay, now we're in ICTD 1.0. Some of you weren't even in college yet. I look at my freshmen. Thanks for coming, guys. You get a point for this, you know. Okay, so that's why they're here. They get points. So ICTD 1.0 really corresponded to a lot of bubbles that were happening. And this is an infographic I found on Thomas Friedman's book, The World is Flat. This was a book that technologists loved because social-minded technologists could take one look. Oh, that blue didn't come out. Well, I guess it's sort of okay. One look at some of Friedman's flattening forces, and the ones in blue are technology. So it really is proof that technology is going to be this tide that lifts all boats. And as soon as that little kid in Chhattisgarh has an internet connection, he's going to know pre-calc tomorrow and be coding and starting his own social enterprise the day after tomorrow. It's great. This was such a book of enthusiasm. I read this, I'm like, I should go join ICTD. Now we all know this book didn't, really work out that well, but it was a good cheerleading book at the time. And I'll talk a little bit more. I critique about that because, as we figured out, the world isn't flat. It's pretty darn spiky. But in any case, the United Nations Millennium Development Goals also came out around this time, about 2000. Kofi Annan announced them. And these were these 8 normative goals in international development that were meant to galvanize the entire funding and development and practitioner community around the 8 top priorities in this space. Well, technologists who now knew that technology could save the world took a look at these 8 things and thought, darn, the international development world hasn't done much in 50 or 60 years. They're still struggling with the same problems as when development started as an industry after World War II with the Bretton Woods agreements and things like that. So we saw a lot of papers about how ICT, information communication technology, was going to actually make these goals attainable. And we weren't necessarily going to do it working in traditional development trajectories. I went to a lot of conferences where computer scientists would get up and say, we're not even going to work with that bloated, awful development industry. We're just going to go in and do this ourselves. So this is very characteristic of ICTD 1.0. It also was kind of the era where we saw a lot of publications like this one that was published in 2009 and commissioned by the World Bank, that connectivity itself led to higher GDP. So my gosh, if this is the case, we just need to flood the market with cell phones and Wi-Fi. And then boom, you shall develop. So I'm not sure I'm any more developed because I have a lot of devices, but I do have a lot of devices up here. So this became a really exciting era of the idea, a lot of funding, a lot of RFPs, requests for proposals from big high-tech companies that said, yes, absolutely, let's get our devices in there. Let's bring people to technology. Let's on-ramp people into technology. And that's exactly what organizations like telecenter.org tried to do. And this was the big thing, was bring people into the technological era. And there's about, I'd say, well, they say, I don't even have to say, half a million telecenters around the world. And what a telecenter is that. It is basically a set of computers, usually donated by Rotary Club or someone's church or brought over in a suitcase. We've done that a few times, where you're bringing people to digital literacy. In fact, you can see the telecenter.org logo up there in the upper right-hand corner. This is also about the time where Sugata Mitra became a staple on the TED stage, showing that if you did things like the hole-in-the-wall computing, where you basically just put a computer in a slum, children would teach themselves advanced concepts and not need formal training to leapfrog the bad educational systems that they were used to being part of. And he continues to be a staple on the stage. I want to be on TED. And then, of course, we have my favorite, the ruggedized, the ever-popular one laptop per child. So, and the idea with this was it was going to get to be under $100, and it was going to have a hand crank, so it would work off the electrical grid. So every kid in the world, this would just fall out of the sky. The guy that actually invented this, Nicholas Negroponte, talked about airlifting these things. And, basically kids would open them up. Well, I won't name her or him. A computer scientist before this very event just tried to open this for 5 minutes and couldn't figure that out. So I don't think this device itself was going to end poverty. By the way, it also requires AC power, which makes it a little less intriguing. So a lot of what I would say ICTD 1.0 was hype. It was fun, but I didn't make a lot of progress. And we honestly didn't really know why. Usher in era, ICTD 2.0. This is when we realized the world might not be as flat as we think it is. Technology might be a great equalizer if people understood it, if they had access to it, if they saw its relevance. But for the most part, they weren't. And we could try to bring people to technology all we wanted to. If they didn't want to be there, it's like, you know, insert analogy here. Okay, so, and as we know, I love it when that happens. You know, the reason that there is inequitable distribution of things around the world is why we have a development industry to start with. And in 2009, one of our most venerated researchers in this space, Richard Heeks, came out with what he called an ICTD 2.0 manifesto. So I figure ICTD 2.0 gets to start in 2009. And it really is about not necessarily bringing people to technology, but bringing technology to people. And technology started showing up in the strangest of places, like in that Maasai gentleman's ear. But in any case, this was kind of an era where we took a step back and thought we need to actually work with the development sectors that we are casting aspersions at, because they actually know something. They've been doing this for 60 or 70 years. And maybe what we can do, maybe our best bet, is to help them sustain and scale their efforts. And then it was also the time of working, a lot of academic courses started, a few programs started like this, because you need to study why these two Maasai with cell phones look happier than the one that doesn't have one. And we did bring technology to people. This is just a map of the undersea cables, broadband cables in 2014, so not that long ago. But that's a lot of connectivity around the perimeter of Africa. And as I was talking to my friend Kawa before this, you know, Mogadishu doesn't have a functional government, but damn it, it's got broadband internet. So, you know, and internet cafes and telecenters still exist, but now we've got the era of the mobile phone. The mobiles are cheap, they're everywhere, they're getting to be ubiquitous. Even places in you know, most rural sub-Saharan African communities, about 50% of rural sub-Saharan Africa now has some sort of coverage. You may have to climb up a tree to get it, but you have at least a bar sometimes. But this became really the SMS till you drop decade, and still is. But these are the phones we're working with. When students come in, they get so excited that they're going to use a smartphone and a smart tablet and a smart this and a smart this and a smart pen and a smart hat. And you're all wearing very smart hats. And you all look smart in your smart hats. But these are the phones we're working with, aka feature phones, where basically you're limited to text experiences for things like mobile internet browsing. And which is fine, because we have things like Facebook Zero, and they can be used. And what really took off were things like agricultural applications, educational applications on the phone, governance applications, learning about your laws, being able to register your child for school. So we do a lot around feature phones. In fact, we do so much around feature phones that 4 countries in Africa now have a moratorium on the amount of new mobile health applications coming in. And this is just a snapshot a few years ago of Uganda. Actually, like last year, we see all these dots are standalone projects. They don't interoperate with each other. They're not working with the Ministry of Health. They're just doing their own thing. And these are great. These are, you know, orgs like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the World Health Organization and, you know, UNICEF. And everyone's going in with an idea. We don't know if they work. And so I think it's really smart now that countries can say, hey, you just need to cool your jets there, developers and technologists. We need to figure out as a country what makes sense for us. And I think that's an interesting shift. It was also the era, this lovely, sexy device, where a lot of us worked on custom hardware because we thought, you know, we're risking a double divide, a double digital divide by not having cell phone access and reliable grid energy for people. And basically those in really rural areas are going to be left out entirely. So we created our own customized, ruggedized communication devices, thinking that was going to close the digital divide. Except what's the sustainability story for something like this? Pretty short-lived. You know, there's not an upgrade plan. And once your PhD student finishes, the project dies. And the community's like, hey, thanks for the crappy brick. You know, and it's nice to know that sometimes they still work. But, you know, this is an era of a lot of experimentation. And I'm a little critical of that experimentation. Yes, we need it. At the same time, when we're working with people's lives and livelihoods, you know, the quality bar just has to be that much higher. And these are sort of the facts that we're working up against. And one of the things that actually really motivated me to create custom hardware was the fact that language and literacy are so low in so many communities, and a language may not even be written, as in the community where I did my dissertation research. So everything has to be oral driven. Except in a lot of cases, making a voice call is 4 times as expensive as sending an SMS. but yet if you're illiterate, you can't send the SMS. So what are we looking at with the access and the culture and literacy and all sorts of issues that start to conflate? And sometimes at the end of the day, technology isn't going to solve the development problem. So, and showing that BOLS and ICTD are somehow inextricably linked, there was this wonderful paper that came out, and I really encourage anybody that wants to get their toes wet in ICTD or any sort of humanitarian technology, a piece called Can Technology End Poverty that came out in the Boston Review of 2010, and grab a card if you want it. I'm happy to send you the PDF because it's hard to find online, that took some of the very best pundits in the field and researchers and threw this question at them. And guess what? At the end of the article, the jury's still out. So can technology end poverty? Some people are saying no. Some people say yes. Sometimes it's a qualified yes. And I think this is where we kind of get to with ICTD, next. Is because if we're not ending poverty, what are we doing? Putting a lot of health technologies out there and a lot of pilots and getting to meet a lot of cool people and taking pictures. And yeah, it's fun. It's great. But if we're not moving the development needle at the end of the day, we really shouldn't call it ICT for development. It should just be tech volunteers gone wild. And we don't need that. We really don't need that, actually. So, and the reason why it's perfect to talk about ICTD in a kind of next context is because if you remember the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, we didn't hit them. Surprise. Some countries did. Scandinavia did. US is close. A lot of the places where I work and my students work, they've never even heard of them. So how do you hit them if you don't know about them? So they've actually been replaced, starting in 2015, with the UN post-2015 framework, what's now being called the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. That hasn't quite caught on yet. But instead of 8 goals, we have 12 goals. And there's going to be a technological response to all of those goals. So just get ready, folks. So, and then also the idea that, technology now is so much different than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. Look at, I didn't know what Arduino was 5 years ago. Now I have students who are making really cool home agriculture products with Arduino. I'm looking at Alex. And the fact that wireless sensor networks are becoming really ubiquitous and easy to plug into development projects. It's almost hard to define ICTD anymore. And so if we look at the fact that infrastructure is in play here and policy is finally catching up to technology, where, and people have their own technologies. They're not waiting for saviors like me to fly in from Colorado and hand them a device. People are doing their own things with this. So where do we find ourselves in the spectrum, and what is ICTD? And I really think ICTD is any ICT in the service of development, which just makes us a more open and broad and inclusive space for anyone to work in. Because somewhere along this line, if you're a technologist with humanitarian aims, you're going to be like, I want to be there, or I want to be there. And, you're going to have a really, really rich space to work and collaborate in. And then you see where they all build on each other. The other thing we're moving to now that we've done development for 70 years and ICTD for 20 years is the fact that the word is out there. If people have cell phones and internet connections and know how to text, they also know how to tell you what's working and what's not in their community. We can push and push and push information till the cows come home, literally sometimes. But when we start getting information back that we don't like this, or we really like this, could we have more? All of a sudden, we're not dealing with people as charity cases anymore. We're dealing with people as consumers and as customers and as collaborators on this. And they can tell us, actually, I don't think we'd use your device. Wait, you're poor. You need me. You need my device. And there's actually this choice now that comes in and kind of challenges the model that we've always done in development and always done in ICTD, at least in ICTD 1 and 2, of donor-driven, academic viewpoint. We know better. We can help you. Where now we have communities that are saying, actually, we really liked that org. We didn't like that org so much. They can pick and choose now. And this is a crazy, wonderful thing because it holds us accountable as technologists to actually build technologies that people will find useful, as opposed to trying to change people's behavior and say, use this technology. It's going to be good for you. Now we can say, oh, I see how that doesn't fit your life. Let me try this for you. How about if we move the button here? How about if we add this functionality? And you have that direct feedback loop now. I still get texts from women I worked with when I was doing my dissertation, and it's like, wow, we're actually connected now. You can't get away from the world anymore. I mean, you can if you drive through Wyoming, but not for very long. So I'm going to come back to Wyoming too. And here's where the exciting part is around what's happening now in technology in developing regions, is that actually, by necessity, it's much more advanced than a lot of the technologies we are using. And we don't have to go through the growing pains, or they don't have to go through the growing pains that we did with kind of the evolution of technology. Other places can take a look at what we've done and kind of go, that IPv4 to IPv6 transition, not so smooth. Oh, you started with analog TV and had to go to digital. How was that conversion for you? They can take a look at some of the things we've done. Oh, you're relying on your electrical grid. How quaint. And they can actually start where we have, where we're still challenged with legacy code bases, with things like Windows. And I worked at Microsoft. I love Windows, but that's a lot of code to fix and take to a different community that might just say, hey, we're going to write our own operating system based on this. Okay, that's very cool. So to start off with a few examples, I want to start with kind of a scenario, and then I want to talk about these things. We're going to spend a lot of time on this slide. When we have millions of more people coming online, that also means million more devices coming online. So, Rachel. So as millions of more devices come online, we run out of IP addresses. Those things that are behind the URL. We get the nice URL, atlas.microsoft.com. That's funny. I just sold us. Okay. How about atlas.colorado.edu? There's a number behind that. Well, we're running out of those addresses. So there's been this move in the developed world to start moving towards a new addressing system. Well, developing countries like Bhutan has decided they're going to be the first IP version 6 country that there is. They're just not even going to waste time with our networking, stack. They're going straight into where the future is going. That's really smart. Another thing that I think is fascinating is the fact when you have millions of people and millions of devices coming online is that's a huge bandwidth constraint. Most of these devices need wireless access. And if you look at kind of where spectrum is allocated in the U.S., AT&T gets their little slice, Verizon gets their little slice. But we have this huge open area of TV white space out there, which was left over from the analog to digital conversion. Well, there's a lot of TV white space all over Africa and Asia and India. And so people are going, hey, we should just create devices that use new white space protocols, and we'll never even run into some of those spectrum management issues. And that's the kind of stuff that the U.S. is now facing and having to go, oh, look at that white space trial in South Africa or Kenya or Indonesia or India. That's great. Maybe we should try that here in the U.S. So it's really interesting how this power dynamic is starting to shift. Another big thing that we're seeing are connectivity issues. How great if you saw a balloon in the sky that signifies that you have Wi-Fi access. That's where Wyoming and Montana could benefit from the Google Loon. But if you see the big balloon going over, that's Google bringing you Wi-Fi. And guess who's trying to work on with drones that do Wi-Fi? Your favorite, Google. Yeah, and Facebook. We're also looking at the fact that a lot of communities are realizing that their electrical grids are such terrible systems, that can't even supply energy to the communities that exist, let alone with all these different devices now drawing on the grid, that we're going to do microgrids. We're going to do little, energy stations themselves in communities. And a lot of ICT deployment and adoption is now married to putting a microgrid behind it so you can actually get energy. Healthcare devices like an ultrasound wand that hangs off your smartphone. Instead of having a multi-$1,000 machine that you carry around with you, how nice to pull something that maybe is $4,000 out of your pocket that was meant for a developing country, but certainly would be in great use in rural clinics and understaffed and underfunded clinics all around the U.S. and the developing world, or in active military theaters. Instead of carrying on a big ultrasound machine, being able to look for shrapnel with something like that. Really interesting innovations around marrying electricity and cell phones, where if your cell phone has minutes left on it, you can transfer those minutes into solar lights. It just kind of feeds off of that and say, okay, I'm going to take 10 of your minutes, and that will turn into 10 minutes of solar-based lights. Or on the converse side, I have this much electricity in this, I'm going to power up my cell phone. So the kind of things that are coming out of, necessity as the mother of invention, I think are very exciting in the developing world. And there's things that actually are super useful for communities like like ours. It's communities that can be under-resourced, communities where people really care about their green footprint, diaspora communities. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then I do want to foray into kind of the big data and open data space, because this is huge in development. The idea now that if you have millions of devices and millions of people talking, you've got a lot more data than you used to have, which is great to mine in order to try to find out, hey, the food prices seem to be spiking in a certain area. We should watch out and maybe anticipate a riot or some shortages going on. Or things like, can doctors look at a variety of texts and tweets and Facebook posts to realize that there might be an outbreak happening? Are we going to catch the next Ebola because of something like big data? Just an incredible planning tool for development to get ahead of disasters before they even happen. And this is just a footprint, kind of a digital footprint of, the Ebola response right now, which is all over the place. And here we have proof that feature phones really are kind of the de facto computer of the global south. But this application right here is called Ushahidi, and I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. This is a live tracking and mapping software project that came out of the Kenyan elections in 2007 by two people sitting around going, we should really have a system to warn people of disruptances that are happening across the city. Now Ushahidi is it's our standard platform for doing mapping and discrete event reporting, that there's about 3,000 instances of Ushahidi being used in the States. And people kind of go, I wonder who made that. Did Google make it? Did Microsoft make it? No, this organization out of Kenya made it, people. And I think that's what takes us to some of these things. This is not the world's greatest slide, but I didn't know how to get 80 incubators and technology hubs onto this slide without making it multiple slides. This is a real big trend that's also helping shape this south to north tech transfer around ICTD, and more importantly, just ICT as an industry. As more development happens and, more research and development happens in country, you've got countries now that are turning out things that we're actually using here, in the U.S. and Europe. So this is just a map of some of the technology incubators and hubs around Africa. There's 80 plus right now, putting out products that are just really interesting. The brick internet generator, for example. This is something that FCC just cleared for use in the United States. Came out of one of the Kenya tech hubs. This is great for areas that don't otherwise have internet connectivity. We have a lot of that in Colorado. Other applications that have been meant for very specific places. I paid a bribe. This is all over India now. It started off outside of Bangalore as a little project. Now there's millions of people that have registered millions of bribes to show patterns of corruption. And it's not that long before someone gets elected on a platform of, hey, I'm bribe free. Look, I paid a bribe says that I'm a good guy. So you have the fact where technology is really actually affecting society in very positive ways. iCow is an application written by two women who are trying to manage better cow gestation periods. So really functional stuff that I would say most of my students wouldn't necessarily think about. Cows and birth and messy farm stuff. Don't they do that at CSU? No, they're going to do that at IHub Nairobi. Okay? So, and we see what's happening. Ushahidi being used, in the U.S. ComCare, a health application platform that's now being used, was developed for the global audiences in the global south, but now is being used with diaspora communities, the Somali community, the Hmong community, et cetera, here in the States, because it's already been localized into those languages and has that kind of cultural context. So, the fact that you have something like Grameen Foundation, which came, and Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on doing microloans in Bangladesh, now has a U.S. office. And here is the Atlanta PD using Ushahidi to track citizen-reported crimes. Not all is totally beautiful and perfect in the ICTD next space. The area where I do most of my research in is trying to figure out who is still not touched by technology and where do some of our divides, cognitive, technological, policy-wise, still exist. And the fact is that there's still a huge gender gap, and not only because women have lower literacy, but there's also this perceived lack of relevance to the internet. And a lot of women I've talked to say, oh, what's in it there for me? You know, my husband uses it or my kids use it, but I don't get where it fits my life. So we haven't done necessarily a great job in trying to anticipate people's needs and working their aspirations into why we think technology actually can be useful in individual and community and regional development. And this is really sad because if we look at some of the statistics and then look at the development axioms that you can only develop, a community can only develop to the degree that women are allowed to be empowered in a community and that women are the key to successful, sustainable community development, we're really missing the boat here. And it's pretty sad when you see, you know, headlines like this. This is only from 2 months ago. You know, women not being banned from using cell phones in whole communities. Women risking beatings for, you know, just so they can have information. I mean, this really brings it home to me that some people really do see the benefit of this and then they're punished on top of wanting to actually participate in the information society. The devices that I do see in the global south that are more targeted towards women are around safety. This is a device you're supposed to wear in your bra that is supposed to shock an attacker. There is a anti-assault bracelet that takes a picture of the person that's assaulting you. I don't know. You're like, please, can you stand there and let me get this picture with you? I don't know. I mean, these things are made in a lab, right? Or using Ushahidi for things like HarassMap or Hollaback here in the U.S. And this is not about women, you know, women's empowerment. This is just about existence. And that just shows that there still is kind of a very second-class divide in technology. My second downer slide in an area that's really interesting to me is the fact that technology itself is still a very dirty business. And we don't see it because I can wrap my cell phone in a cute little I don't know where it is, you know, leopard case, and that hides the fact that there are some, you know, pretty awful blood minerals being used in this. And as we've talked in my freshman class, you know, we've talked about things like the Fairphone, which is an Android smartphone that's all done with fair sourcing, or Intel working on trying to do conflict-free chips. End-of-life issues with e-waste are just horrifying. And if you need to be horrified, you can come to my class in a week and we're playing a video that'll make you, you know, want to like sterilize your computers. And I don't know, it just really weighs on you when you see what we do with our waste, especially when we think we're donating computers. But this is also where education helps, and I think that the students that go through my program are very well aware of sourcing issues. They're aware of where these things go. They're aware that if you put a technology in a community, you better have an end-of-life scenario for it, or else it's just going to end up as e-waste. You're going to see someone somewhere, you know, using this for, I don't know. All right, so looking up the elephant's nose, I want to close on a few things that I think are where ICTD 3.0 might be going. And one is technology for accountability. This, I think, is really exciting because what we've always had in technology is the engineers work here and the ICT people work over here, and we're in each other's communities, and they're doing great stuff. They're doing well projects and latrines and cook stoves and wind power turbines and all this stuff, and we're doing internet and mobile apps, and we haven't really worked together yet. And I think that one of the exciting things about Atlas moving back under the College of Engineering is the chance that I get to work with a lot more engineers, several who are here, thank you for coming, from my engineering sustainable community development class. But why can't we just integrate better? And what I mean by that is we should have integrated circuitry in every cook stove or well project that goes out that actually is monitoring real world usage and parts, you know, particulates that are being emitted or not emitted. And then we'll have a really good track record in monitoring and evaluation of the kinds of great engineering projects that are out there. And Colorado is so ripe for this. We've got Engineers Without Borders, we have IDE, we have the Posner Center. There's a lot of really cool core engineering for development organizations here. Catalyst Design is moving here from Oakland, so it's just more and more happening. And this is great because you want to know if your project works. It could also be a gold standard. Imagine USAID or the Gates Foundation saying, this is where the monitoring evaluation story is. Because people are not good at actually reporting scientific data, unless you're a scientist. And even then. All right. So, and then what do we do with big and open data? Now that we know all this stuff, are we responding to situations better? Does this hold us accountable to doing things? If I'm seeing activities on my screen, you know, in the Horn of Africa, and so are everybody at USAID and World Bank and CEDA and DFID, it can't unsee that data now. Now we've got this kind of mining algorithms that bring it right to us, and we actually have to act in responsible manners. Will we? I don't know. I hope so. I'm hoping this is one of the trends of accountability. And we've talked about fairer sourcing and decommissioning of technology. Certainly I spent probably too much time on the technology for innovation side, but what this does is remove the argument of is ICTD really a computer science topic or not? Because for a few years now, there's been this kind of idea that if you do technology for development, it's computer science light. It's cute. It's diet engineering. We're working on, hand-me-down computers and in places where there's slow internet access. Not anymore. Now we're working with Google Loon balloons. So it really takes that out of that kind of definition. I'm hoping this helps more young scholars that come up and are challenged to find tenured homes and that kind of thing, because this has been considered a practitioner space. Well, now it's also a really cutting edge research space. We're going to see a lot more south-to-south collaboration, south-to-north collaboration that we talked about. And certainly, I saw last week a thing about 3D printed food. That's kind of fascinating. Where does 3D printing play into this? Should we put a 3D printer in communities and say, oh, that kind of thing's broken? Here, print off a new Wi-Fi arm. Here, print off a new robinet for your plumbing system. Fix this. There's going to be a lot of interaction because there's already a huge Maker Faire, DIY, Fab Lab presence around the world, but ICTD and the Fab Lab communities and the Maker Faire communities are not necessarily working that closely together. And they're certainly going to start to. There's a really wonderful report that just came out from Intel 2 or 3 days ago trying to look at the impact of merging these two. And then there's lots happening, of course, on the computer science side. Nanotechnology, software-defined radios, wearables. What if I live, I don't know, a 2-day drive from the nearest place that has internet connection, and, even though Revi Sterling came with one of these devices once, I'm not getting my email anymore. Wouldn't it be great to have a fabric that sort of just fabric that vibrated, okay, a fabric that beeped when you had new mail or voicemail or that kind of stuff, and you could let them store up and go, I'm going to go to the village now and get my mail. Better yet, what if it just read you your stuff from your fabric? We're doing so many interesting things with wearable computing, software-defined radio. How do I come in and use different parts of FM radio stations to selectively broadcast into communities under repressive regimes without getting people in trouble for broadcasting and doing pirate radio? Nanotech. As several of you know, I've been really interested in the idea of what is the idea of how small can we get computers so that we could actually help track those that are victims of sexual and human trafficking, brothel raids, etc. I think there's a lot we can do with really targeted nanotech. And then lastly, technology for aspiration. Because if you don't want to do this, why are we doing it to start with? Development is inherently a psychological exercise. Someone has to go, I'm here, I want to progress to here. That is a psychological and cognitive decision. And, where does technology play into that? I think there's a lot that, this is almost too fuzzy for a lot of, the computer scientists. But there's a lot around technology that is itself empowering. And while people back in that article in the Boston Review have gone back and forth with me on this in several cases, I have seen where someone will take a device like this, go off into the bush, and tell it its problems. Okay. That's interesting to me. So there's something there around mental health, around aspirations, around healing, around self-esteem. And I say, what are you doing? I'm just talking to the device. Well, no one's going to hear you. It's not hooked up. That's fine. I heard it. I played it back. This is my issue. This is my story. Well, can I hear it? No. So the idea that someone is choosing to use technology rather than a person-to-person communication, that's kind of fascinating to me. What's behind that? And could we actually leapfrog what we're doing with traditional global mental health strategies and empowerment strategies around some of this stuff? I also do think that technology extends capabilities. It magnifies talents. If you thought you did something fairly well, can we put the technology behind it to take you to that next level? And there's also the idea, I think in ICTD we're so focused on the D sometimes. Here is your health app, sir. Do not use it for anything else. Here is your school app. Don't text on it. But the fact is that our applications have a lot of entertaining and useful features that make using them enjoyable. And that's actually a marketing, goal. It was funny because this summer I was, in a slum community in Kenya, and my freshmen will laugh at this because they see me do this every morning at 10 a.m. I get a little reminder to pet a kitty application on my phone. And basically you can pet a kitty on your iPhone, and when it is successfully petted, like Tamagotchi was a few years ago, it gives kibble to shelter cats. Well, this woman I was talking to in Nairobi was like, I want to do that. Okay. And she's like, this is so cool. I'm helping American cats. People want to be connected. They want to feel useful, and they want to feel like something they're doing is having an impact, no matter where I would look at her on the development spectrum. So there's something there. And so I think that if we look at best of applications, we're going to start seeing a lot more around these cognitive areas of development. But we're out of time. So I want to know what your ideas are. Where's tech going in the future? Where's it going? I know you're going to cake in a minute, but what do people think? Or I'll take any questions. And only one person left. That is a successful talk. Or something. Or you're all just like, I can't get out of here with the hat. She'll make fun of me. But I'd love to take your questions. I just threw a lot at you. I just did this sort of digital barf, which would be a great application for technology, I'm sure. But I'd love to talk about anything you have here, anything about the 5 years of our program, the 20 years of ICTD, and then absolutely we can go have some cake and celebrate. Yes?
I was wondering if you ran into any resistance from governments as far as expanding technology, because I don't know, that might be bad for some regimes in power.
Yes, that's a great question. And the question was about, have I ever encountered resistance from governments in bringing in technologies that are meant to be empowering? Absolutely, all the time. There are a lot of governments that, their first priority is not empowering all of their citizens. Because they're resource-strapped themselves. And I remember this has happened in Kenya, it's happened in Peru, it's happened in Uganda when I've talked to officials who say, why are you out there? The next thing they're going to want is they're going to want roads. Then they're going to want services. And then we're going to have to bring a school in. Did you tell them that they're allowed to that they're entitled to secondary free education? I'm like, oh, sorry about that. So yes, there actually is a lot of government pushback. But in many cases, it is that working with the government, they can throw you out of a country too, right? They can ban you from certain places. The government can make things really hard to work with. So finding that sort of win-win of this is actually good. If you're helping people along, they're going to be more proactive and productive citizens. It's going to help your economy, but it really is a tough line. And there are a lot of governments that, yes, are very pro-development, like Rwanda, and a lot of governments that would really rather see marginalized groups not demand anything from the government. Absolutely. And there's a lot of governments, and Heather will agree to this, that make doing research very impossible because they'll say, oh, you want to do research in our country? Well, that'll cost you. And I mean, the bribes and the corruption they're really limiting factors. Yeah. Heather.
Great talk. I love that I learn something new every time I hear you talk about ICTD.
Thank you.
I'm curious about the SDGs and kind of what else is going on around them besides just adding more goals, which are similar to the 8 old goals, to try and mitigate some of these problems of not achieving the 8.
Well, as you'll see, some of the SDGs are the same as the Millennium Development Goals, such as empowering girls and women to achieve gender equity. There's some education goals. These are meant to be more specific. So where in the Millennium Development Goals, where it didn't necessarily call out food or peace, I think it is a more holistic look. It is more, it does increase more sectors. Or it involves more sectors and try to increases the scope. At the same time, I think when you look at such sector-driven development, there's a lot of development that has to happen outside of these 12 goals, and it may not get the funding and attention that it really needs. But I do think these are overall a more comprehensive list. What I worry about is like the post-2030 framework that might have like 400 things to it, but hopefully that won't be the case. Yes. Oh.
What do you think are the best applications for monitoring values? Because it seems like it's a massive opportunity. But which one do you do first, and where do you focus to make it that next standard? And the explanation saying, yeah, this is how we're going to implement our projects.
I don't think I can answer that one. Yeah. Nick just asked what the very best kind of monitoring and evaluation platform is on technology. I think right now what I see are a lot of workshops around what does monitoring and evaluation mean? What is the ICT response to that? Because we do have several applications that are out there, like the Google ODK, Form Hub, that kind of stuff, where we can certainly put forms that are digital. And that's nice that we're not working with paper, and the goat doesn't walk away with your survey results, or it doesn't, mold in the river, from down the Amazon. But and it certainly is good at error catching. If I'm running a survey off of a phone or a tablet, there can be some smart algorithms in the back. I'd say that's kind of where digital monitoring and evaluation is right now, but it hasn't gone beyond that. The other side, of course, would be like the wireless sensor networks that are looking at environmental indicators. When I was working with Professor Carl Linden on the Reinventing the Toilet Challenge, we're trying to figure out, and Alex was part of that as well, trying to figure out, what kind of sensors could you put in to do threshold of bacteria, smell, because at a certain point, if the latrine smells, above a what is that threshold where you're not going to use it, and then trying to figure out, what could we actually environmentally monitor in this kind of close space. So I think that there's the idea that you could use tools to do M&E and that the tool themselves can do monitoring and evaluation. But this is a very nascent space for us. And that probably didn't adequately answer that at all. Okay. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about, as you look to the future, about building some effective collaborations with organizations, like you were saying, that are in the field doing the development stuff where technology can really move their work forward?
Well, sure, absolutely. I think that, and the question was, can I talk a little bit about some of the collaboration opportunities with NGOs, because I do think that back in the ICTD 1.0 space, we were running to the field as the technical NGO and perpetuating a lot of failures and not understanding the context and the development expertise that so many NGOs had. Now, what I think we're uniquely gifted with in Colorado are organizations like the Posner Center, and actually we have a Posner Center organization here from Access Mobile and my friend Kawa, where you have for-profit and non-for-profit organizations that are working under one big development umbrella in one space. And it's been wonderful because with 60 organizations there, I can help line up my students with organizations that are doing digital literacy in Cambodia, or doing really cool, actual health work in Uganda that isn't banned by the government, and try to figure out where our students can complement existing organizations. Because at the end of the day, the technology is just the tool set. And if I can go into an organization and talk to them about what their future needs are and how this could potentially scale and sustain them, what they realize is that, yes, someday they might love to have a technical person, on staff full time, but for right now, we can be their development laboratory. And that also works with, we've been doing that a lot with organizations in the Denver area. What I'm finding with more of my cohorts that come in, and every cohort has a different flavor, is the last two cohorts have been very focused on Denver-specific issues and Front Range-specific issues. So working with organizations like Revision, which is a non-for-profit that looks at food desert areas in Denver. We've been working with them for 2 years with student projects and trying to build prototypes to help them turn community gardens into fully fledged CSAs and doing, tracking of vegetables. So, yeah. Kawa, go for it. Okay, but you might have to answer it, too.
Your last question, I'd like to think I'm in the 3.0, the next.
You are so in the 3.0.
Can you go back, please, to the, since you're going back, though, to the Uganda moratorium? I was like, wow, she really teed me up. So, okay, so we have a private, Access Mobile is a private, for a little background, it's a private company, it's not an NGO. We're providing a healthcare solution in Uganda. Now, there is absolutely a moratorium, but interestingly, it doesn't apply to private sector.
Exactly.
So it's only public sector. So we are actively in Uganda. We started during the moratorium. It was actually a nice constraint. There's a lot of health facilities in Uganda, so we said, okay, how do we start? Well, let's offer value to private sector. Like real simple, let's figure out the value proposition, and now we have the 4 largest hospitals in Uganda on our system. That happened in about 2 months. And we have 50,000 patient records, and it's all while this is going on. And my plan for the company is to be everywhere in Uganda and to take over about 80% market penetration.
Well, there go our jobs as ICTD professionals, but no.
And that's just Uganda.
Yes, that's true. She's got Kenya and Nigeria on our radar as well. But let me talk a little bit. There's kind of this 95, and this is my last thing because I'm now officially risking going over. We only have 5 more minutes, and as everyone knows, I kind of like to talk. But there's kind of this 95 and 5 percentile distinction where ICTD projects and development projects in general can be super effective if they're not just targeted at that really poor, destitute 5%, which is where a lot of people want to put, their energy and focus, because that's where you think you're going to see the biggest impact. And that's why places like Kibera slum, the biggest slum in Eastern Africa, has over 700 NGOs in Kibera itself. I mean, you can't throw a rock and not hit 6 NGO workers, and that's probably a good thing. But at the same time, the fact is that there's only so much you can do with 5% of the population. But if you have a project like M-Pesa, which is a mobile banking system that's been wildly popular, it's wildly popular because the other 95% of the population also wants to use it. It just makes banking easier. So if we can find these wins where actually everybody benefits, but certainly people who need it most will benefit from it most. People who are unbankable now have a banking system, as opposed to people who certainly could have a bank, but it's much easier to have the digital currency tied to your telephone number and your minutes, because then it's harder to rob you. So, trying to find those examples, and then it's not like you're using, a food stamp card or something like that. You're using the system that everybody is using. So if we can find those where we're actually benefiting all sectors of the population, it also helps fund that 5% population that we keep trying to do. So I think now that, more and more nonprofits are getting smarter and moving into the for-profit space, we're going to see not just ICTD 3.0, but development 3.0. Joellen, and then Ju.
I feel like you put ICTD on the map. You are one of the people who put ICTD.
I love you.
So you had this vision 5 years ago, and you brought it to life. What advice do you have for the rest of us who might have big dreams and big visions that we want to?
Well, there you are on the map, in your biking clothes. I don't know. The question is, what would I hope for other people trying to put themselves on the map in ICTD? I don't know. I'm blown away by my cohorts all the time. I mean, I'm looking at Carrie right now, who comes in with these entrepreneurial ideas for technology that my brain is actually not capable of having. I just am not wired that way, and that is so exciting. Or the work that you, Joellen, are working on with Divi as a for-profit, that is going to bring light past that and close that first mile, that last mile loop. I just think that people have ideas, and they're coming to ICTD because they're realizing that either their ideas are going to help a lot of people, and that, that's an opportunity that they shouldn't miss. That sure, their idea could be cute and it could sit on a shelf, in Boulder in a little, pop-up store, have a Kickstarter thing, but actually they could take it to millions of people. Or they have a new perspective just on development as a whole that, comes from their background in the Peace Corps or the military, or their own, being raised, being a first-generation person, or having never left Colorado. I think what we all bring to ICTD, and to probably any of our careers, is just this amazing uniqueness of who we are and what we care about and what we love. And I think that's fabulous, because ICTD, we need all the ideas we can get. There are so many, and when I talk about how students get depressed in my classes, they're just like, oh my God, the weight of the world's problems. What do I pick what to solve? What do you care about? What do you love? My job as an educator is just to help you springboard from here to there. Yeah. One last question. Judy, do you have something? And then I will officially shut up. Oh, the 2015 goals? Are we picking the only slide that I really don't have a lot of confidence to talk about because I added it 20 minutes before this talk? All right, no problem. This is why we do this. Trial by fire. Okay. I can't hear you. Will you yell?
This place was really amazing, and I think this captures what ICTD is about.
Okay. Yeah.
So, could you share your more specific, concrete vision if you want to push ICTD forward to more research institutions? Like, what kind of person can you have in this forum?
Wow. The question was sort of like, where we would take ICTD as a research agenda to other universities, et cetera. And I would say I'm probably ill-equipped to answer that question, because while I love research, and I think research is fundamental to doing a lot of the incredible work that's being at ICTD, I think what we need are more practitioners. I love the master's space. I love the practitioner space because, to me, researchers are great. They're taking in ideas that we may not see come to fruition for maybe 3, 5, 10 years, but I'm very impatient. I would like to see a change in development before I hit, well, my next big milestone is 50. So, just, keep gaining weight and getting older. But, I really love the idea of working with practitioners and having more master's programs at the space, because actually there's lots. There are more people, I would say, that are working in ICTD at a PhD level than there are at a master's level, because there are these big, huge questions to figure out. What is the technology response to? What is appropriate? What is equitable? What is sustainable? I just want to get out there and get shit done. So